All night I dreamed of Hubert. I had almost forgotten how he laughed, but his laughter sounded so clear in my dream, as if we were sitting on the veranda together again, watching the dusk fade over Springdale. When I woke up, I lay awake for a long time without opening my eyes, trying to hold on to the last crumbs of sleep. But it was a struggle I always lost. The house without Hubert had become too big and empty. The 3 years since his death hadn't made the loneliness any easier. Every creak of the floorboards only reminded me of his absence. Sometimes I caught myself talking to him out loud, a habit I could never break. 47 years of marriage can't be erased from my memory like chalk from a slate. Today I made up my mind. On the kitchen table was a neat folder labeled Fitzpatrick Realtors, Springdale. I'd signed the contract to sell the house last night, but I still couldn't believe I'd actually done it. I poured myself a cup of tea and opened the window. The May morning was crisp, but already promised a hot day. My garden was in bloom. The azaleas Hubert loved so much, the peonies by the porch, the phlox along the path, all this would soon belong to other people. The thought brought tears to my eyes, but I stubbornly wiped them away. At 75, it's time to learn to let go. The phone rang and I flinched. It was Rowena. "So, did you sign?" she asked without preamble. "Good morning to you too," I grinned. "Yes, I did." "And how are you feeling?" Rowena always asked straightforwardly. Half a century of friendship had accustomed me to her way of talking. "It's weird," I said honestly, as if I were both a traitor and a freed prisoner. "Nonsense," Rowena snorted. "You just finally decided to live for yourself. It's about time. You've been living for others for what, 60 years? 70? You've given this family more than it deserves. I didn't say anything." Rowena was right, as always, even though she was saying things I was afraid to admit to myself. I'd spent my whole life taking care of others. First my parents, then Hubert, then Sybil, and then Quentin. It seemed like someone always needed me. To make dinner, to iron shirts, to give my savings, to listen to problems, to give advice that no one was going to follow. But did I really need it? "Don't be silent, Lorna." Rowena's concern slipped into her voice. "Say something." "I'm scared," I admitted. "That's normal. It'd be weird if you weren't. But think about what's ahead of you. A new apartment, no creaky floorboards, no leaky faucets, and a trip. That's what you've dreamed of all your life." I looked out the window again. The garden was beautiful, but it needed constant maintenance. The roof needed repair. The basement was always flooding during the spring rains. The house that had once been my and Hubert's dream had become a burden. "What about Quentin?" I blurted out. Rowena sighed heavily. "Quentin is a big boy now, even though he acts like a child. It's time he learned to solve his own problems. You don't have to save him every time he gets into another adventure." "But he's my grandson," I objected weakly. "And he's recently married." "Yes, to that horrible woman," interrupted Rowena. "For heaven's sake, Lorna, you can't stand her yourself. Admit it, I didn't say anything." It was hard not to agree with Rowena. Darcy really was a complicated person. From the moment she'd met Quentin, she'd looked at me like I was an ATM that could be used to get money for a new car, furniture, or another renovation. She despised my house, considering it rustic and old-fashioned, though that didn't stop her from making plans for her inheritance. "Believe me," Rowena continued, "when Quentin finds out the house is for sale, he'll be furious. But that's not your problem. You're entitled to your own life, especially now." I knew what she meant. Last year, I was diagnosed with early-stage glaucoma. Not fatal, but a reminder that time is of the essence. "I'll come by your place tonight," Rowena said. "I'll bring a bottle of that wine you like. We'll celebrate the beginning of a new life." When we finished talking, I felt more confident. Rowena always had a way of instilling courage in me. Maybe that's what made us such close friends. We met when we worked at Madame Fournier's atelier, the only place in Springdale that sewed real haute couture. I was a seamstress, she was a dressmaker, both young, ambitious, hopeful. And then I met Hubert, fell in love, got married, and gradually all my ambition faded into the background. Rowena never married, had a successful career, traveled halfway around the world. Sometimes I envied her, though I never admitted it. Hubert was a good man and a loving husband, but his traditional views did not suggest that a wife should work. I will provide for you and our family, he used to say. You don't have to worry about money. Gradually, I turned into a housewife, forgetting my dreams of traveling and a career in the fashion industry. I went upstairs to the bedroom and opened the closet. On the top shelf was a box of photos. Going through them, I found different periods of our lives: the wedding, Sybil's birth, the first day of school, the prom, her wedding, Quentin's birth. So many moments that seemed so important. And now? Sybil was living her own life now, forever busy working in the botanical garden. She rarely called, even less often came to visit. Quentin. He was more complicated. After Hubert's death, he made a habit of checking up on me, coming unannounced, ostensibly to see if I was all right. In reality, these visits ended up being requests for money. Grandma, I need a small amount of money for business development. Grandma, I found a great investment. Grandma, Darcy and I need money for a down payment on a car. Each time I gave in, even though I knew these investments would never end well. For the past 6 months, he'd been asking me if I was planning to move to a smaller place. He suggested I look for a cozy apartment in a nursing home. I was not a naive old lady and understood perfectly well that he wanted my house. A big one, in a good neighborhood with a beautiful garden. I suspected that he and Darcy had already mentally arranged their furniture there. But I wasn't going to move into a retirement home. After a long search, I found a small but bright apartment in a new building near downtown Springdale. Close to a park, a movie theater, a cafe, and most importantly, a bus stop with a direct route to the international airport. Because my plan was much bigger than just moving. I planned to split the money from the sale of the house into 2 parts. One, to put in a bank account to live on interest and a small pension, the other to spend on a trip around the world. Hubert never liked traveling. Why go anywhere when it's so good at home? He'd say. And I obeyed. All my life I had collected travel agency brochures, watched travel shows, read travel articles, but I had never traveled further than San Francisco, where Hubert's sister lived. Now I decided to make up for lost time. At 75, many people don't dare to travel, but I felt quite healthy and energetic. My parents had lived to be 90, so I had another 15 years to live. I didn't want to spend them sitting in a rocking chair and reminiscing about the past. The pictures gave me a pang of nostalgia. Here was Hubert holding little Sybil, smiling proudly at the camera. And here we are at a picnic by the lake. Sybil is a teenager now, frowning and looking away from the lens as all teenagers do. Sybil and Brandon's wedding, the photo already faded with time. They divorced when Quentin was 5. Brandon quickly disappeared from our lives. He went to California, remarried, started a new family. Sybil never remarried, though as far as I knew she was in a relationship. I looked for a long time at the photo of Quentin in his graduation gown, smiling so broadly and sincerely. Hubert and I were so proud of him back then. The first in the family to go to university. We gave all our savings to pay for his tuition. Hubert even took an extra job, even though his health left much to be desired even then. But Quentin didn't finish university. He dropped out in his 3rd year, deciding that a career in the entertainment industry does not require a diploma. Since then, he's been scraping by on odd jobs, working as an assistant producer at a local radio station, trying to create his own podcast, or getting a job as a DJ at a club. Nothing lasted longer than a couple months. His latest hobby is some sort of online business selling vintage clothing. Judging by the frequency with which he asked for money for development, things weren't going well. But he was never discouraged, always full of new ideas and plans. In this, he reminded Hubert of an incorrigible optimist. The doorbell rang, and I shuddered. The clock read 12:30, too early for Rowena. I looked through the peephole and saw the real estate agent, a tall woman with bright red hair. "Mrs. Blundell?" She smiled as I opened the door. "I'm Fiona Fitzpatrick. We didn't have an appointment, but I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. I wanted to give you the great news. We've already got an interested buyer, a young family with 2 kids. They have seen pictures of the house on our website and would like to view it as soon as possible." I invited her in. Fiona Fitzpatrick spoke quickly and energetically, showing some documents explaining the inspection procedure, talking about potential buyers. I listened to her as if through absorbent cotton, still holding the photographs. "Mrs. Blundell?" Fiona looked at me carefully. Are you all right? Yes, I nodded, just thinking about the fact that my whole life has been spent in this house. Fiona smiled understandingly. It's never easy to leave a house that holds so many memories. But think of the possibilities that are open to you. A new apartment, a new life. And then isn't it wonderful to have a new generation growing up in your home? Life will go on, family traditions will continue. I didn't tell her that I had little interest in continuing family traditions. I had my own personal reason for selling the house. But I nodded politely as she continued her monologue and finally set a day for prospective buyers to view the house. When Fiona left, I went up to the bedroom again. In the closet behind a box of photographs was an old leather album. I opened it. There were magazine clippings, travel agency brochures, postcards from Rowena from around the world. My own personal treasure trove of dreams that I'd carefully collected over the years. I flipped through the pages. Paris, Rome, London, Tokyo, Sydney, Marrakech. The names of the cities sounded like music. So many times I imagined myself walking along these streets, sitting in cozy cafes, looking at ancient cathedrals and museum exhibits. Now it could all become a reality. I'm going, I whispered, looking at the picture of the Eiffel Tower. I'm really going. The phone rang. This time it was Sybil. Mom, she said without greeting. Quentin called me. He says he saw a for sale sign in front of your house. Is it true? Here it is. The moment I'd been dreading. I took a deep breath. Yes, it's true, I'm selling the house. There was a pause. But, why? Sybil sounded genuinely puzzled. You never said anything about it. If you wanted the money, we could. I don't need money, I interrupted. I just decided it was time to make a change in my life. The house was getting too big for me on my own. I found a nice apartment closer to the center. But that's Dad's house. There was a note of indignation in Sybil's voice. You've lived there together for so many years. It's our family home. Yes, I agreed. But now your family's all scattered. You come once every 6 months, Quentin only when he needs money. I sit here alone among empty rooms and memories. I want something new. Quentin is very upset, Sybil said after a pause. Do you know that he and Darcy were planning? No, I interrupted again. No, I interrupted her again. I don't know what they were planning because they never discussed it with me. If Quentin thought he was going to get the house after I died, he could have at least asked me directly. Mother. Sybil sounded indignant. Quentin never thought of your death. It was just that he and Darcy dreamed of someday living in a family home, raising their children there. I closed my eyes. Someday, meaning when I'm gone. Well, I had other plans. Sybil, I said as gently as I could, I realize this comes as a surprise to you, but the decision has been made. I'm selling the house and moving. The estate agent's just been here, and we've already got an interested buyer. So soon? Sybil sounded incredulous. You don't even want to discuss it with your family? I've already thought it over, I said firmly. It's my decision. We talked some more. Sybil was upset and didn't understand my motives. I didn't tell her about my plans to travel because that would only raise more questions and objections. When we finished talking, I was left with an unpleasant feeling. I hated to upset my daughter, but at the same time, I knew I was doing the right thing. In the evening, Rowena came over with the promised bottle of wine. We sat on the veranda, watching the sunset and talking about the future. I'm proud of you, Rowena said, raising her glass. You're finally doing what you've dreamed of all your life. Sybil doesn't understand, I sighed. And Quentin will be furious. They'll get over it, Rowena said. They're adults. They have their own lives and you have yours. I looked out at the garden, drowning in the twilight. Soon there would be other people living here, other voices, and I would be somewhere far away, finally free from the weight of expectations and obligations. To a new life, I said, toasting Rowena. To a new life, she echoed. The move happened faster than I expected. A young couple with children, brought in by Fiona Fitzpatrick, fell in love with the house at first sight. They offered even more than the asking price just to move in as soon as possible. 3 weeks after I signed the sales contract, the moving van was parked on my front porch. I walked around the rooms, ticking off a list of things I needed to take with me. The new apartment was much smaller than the house, and I had to part with many items that had accumulated over decades. It was harder than I thought it would be. Every item was linked to memories, every little thing triggering a bout of nostalgia. "You can't take the whole house with you," said Rowena, who had come over to help sort things. "Be practical." I knew she was right, but that didn't make the choice any easier. The massive dining table that Hubert and I used to host every Christmas? Too big for a new apartment. The sofa Sybil used to read on as a child? Worn out beyond belief. Hubert's vinyl record collection? Bulky and impractical. "You could digitize the music," Rowena suggested, seeing my hesitation in front of the shelves of records. "It's easy to do now." "But it wouldn't be the same," I sighed. Hubert loved these records, the sound of the needle, the crackle. Rowena gently took the envelope with the Ella Fitzgerald record from my hands. "Look, I understand how you feel, but you can't keep all this stuff, just physically. The apartment's not rubber." I nodded. Of course she was right. I just wasn't prepared for how painful the process would be. Every item selected for the thrift store felt like a piece of my soul was being torn away. Luckily, Rowena was there for me, practical and determined. She helped me sort things, called movers, arranged with the charity to remove unwanted furniture and clothes. Without her, I'd probably have gotten bogged down in memories and not been able to move. "What's this?" Rowena asked, pulling a leather scrapbook out of the closet. "Oh, I remember it. Your dream collection." She began flipping through the pages, smiling. "Lorna, these are all the same pictures from 30 years ago. The Eiffel Tower, the Colosseum, the Taj Mahal. You didn't add anything?" "I did." I pointed to the pages at the end of the album. "Bali, Machu Picchu, the Tahiti Islands." Rowena scrutinized the magazine clippings and postcards. "Some of these places have changed a lot," she said. "You need up-to-date information. I have some new guidebooks. I'll bring them to you." "Thank you." I gently took the album from her. "It's definitely coming with me to my new apartment." Rowena smiled. "Of course it is. It's no longer just a dream, but a plan of action." The day of the move, it was raining. I stood on the porch with an umbrella in my hand, watching the movers move boxes and furniture out. Water ran down the gutters, dripped from the veranda roof. The garden looked sad and neglected, even though I had tended it until the last day. The last to leave the house was the head of the trucking crew, a stocky man with kind eyes. "Everything is loaded, ma'am," he said. "We can go to the new address." I nodded and looked back at the house one last time. The empty window stared back at me like the eyes of an old friend who had to say goodbye forever. A lump came to my throat. "Do you need a minute?" the loader asked softly. "No," I shook my head. "Let's go." I locked the door and put the keys in an envelope. The day after tomorrow, they were to be handed over to their new owners. I got into Rowena's car, who was waiting for me behind the wheel, and we drove off. I didn't look back. The new apartment was in a modern building with an elevator, which was a big advantage for my arthritic knees. The windows overlooked a park rather than a garden, but the green landscape was still pleasing to the eye. The apartment was bright, with a spacious kitchen and a cozy living room. The bedroom was smaller than in the house, but for a single woman it was quite sufficient. The movers quickly and neatly arranged the furniture and brought in the boxes. I made tea and offered them cookies to thank them for their good work. They declined embarrassedly, but eventually agreed to a quick snack. When Rowena and I were alone, I felt strangely relieved. The move I dreaded was behind me. Now I had a new place to settle into. "So how does it feel?" Rowena asked, helping me unpack the dishes. "Weird," I said honestly. "Like I was in a hotel or visiting someone. I can't believe this is my home now." "It'll pass," Rowena said confidently. "In a week you won't remember living in that old house." I doubted that, but I didn't say anything. Rowena wanted to cheer me up, and I appreciated it. We spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking and putting things away. By evening, I was exhausted physically and emotionally, but the apartment was starting to settle in. Familiar things looked different in their new surroundings, as if they had taken on a second life. "You need to rest," Rowena said, noticing my tiredness. "I'll go home and come back tomorrow to help with the rest of the boxes." When she left, I sat in a chair by the window and stared out at the park for a long time. Lanterns illuminated the paths where evening visitors strolled. Somewhere in the distance, music was playing. Life in the city center was different from the quiet suburbs where my house stood. Here, everything was in motion, full of sounds and colors. I took out my cell phone and dialed Sybil's number. We hadn't spoken since the day I'd informed her of the sale of the house. She hadn't called and I knew she was hurt, but now I wanted to share the news with her. Hello? Sybil's voice sounded wary. Hello, darling. It's me. Mom. Her voice was a mixture of relief and tension. How are you? I've moved in, I said. Today. I'm sitting in my new apartment now. Already? Sybil sounded surprised. So soon? Yes, it was very quick. The buyers were in a hurry. There was a pause. And how is the new place? Sybil finally asked. It's good. Bright apartment, view of the park, and no stairs. There's an elevator in the building. It's good, said Sybil uncertainly. For your knees. We were quiet for a moment. It was obvious she wanted to ask something else. Did Quentin call you? She made up her mind at last. No. I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. Should he have? Sybil sighed. He's very upset, Mother, he and Darcy. Anyway, they were counting on this house. I know, I said softly. But I never promised them the house. Not while I was alive, not as an inheritance. Yes, but... Sybil hesitated. They thought it went without saying. That the family home would stay in the family. I felt irritation rising inside. Of course they thought. They always thought they were due something without bothering to ask me. Sybil, I said as calmly as I could, I'm 75 years old. I've lived in this house for nearly 50 years. All my adult life I've taken care of others, your father, you, Quentin. Don't you think I have a right to live for myself now? Of course you do, Sybil said hastily. It's just, Quentin said he and Darcy wanted to buy the house from you. Not to get it for free, but to buy it, when you're ready to sell. I chuckled. And with what money were they going to buy it? Quentin changes jobs every 3 months, and Darcy spends more than she earns. Mother! Sybil sounded indignant. They're a young family. They need somewhere to live, especially now that... She paused, but I was already alert. When what? I asked. Sybil was silent for a moment, as if weighing whether to go on. When Darcy is pregnant, she said at last. I felt my heart skip a beat. Darcy's pregnant? Does that mean I'm going to have a great-grandson or great-granddaughter? How long ago? I asked, trying to control my emotions. About 3 months. They wanted to wait until the second trimester to announce it to everyone. But now... She stopped talking again. Now what? I was beginning to lose my patience. Now they have nowhere to live, Sybil blurted out. They're renting an apartment, but the landlord's selling the house and they have to move out in a month. They were counting on you to buy the house by then. Quentin said he hinted at it. Hinted? Yeah, if you count hints as him asking me if I wanted to move to a smaller place. But he never said he wanted to buy a house. Sybil, I said, trying to sound reasonable. I'm sorry about Quentin and Darcy's situation, but I can't turn back the clock. The house is sold. The deal's closed. I got the money, some of it already spent. Spent on what? Sybil sounded genuinely uncomprehending. I took a deep breath. Sooner or later, I was going to have to tell her anyway. I bought the tickets. A trip around the world. It had been a week since I'd moved in. I was slowly getting used to the new apartment, the new routes, the new neighbors. Every morning I went out on the small balcony with a cup of tea and watched the city wake up. It was nothing like the quiet dawns in my old house, but there was a certain beauty in the bustle. Life was boiling, and I felt a part of it. After my tense conversation with Sybil, I expected Quentin to call me, or even to come, but the days passed, and there was no word from him. I didn't know whether to rejoice or worry. On the one hand, it gave me time to settle in. On the other, uncertainty always tired me more than confrontation. Maybe he's just calmed down and accepted the situation, Rowena suggested as we discussed it over tea. I looked at her skeptically. Do you believe that yourself? Quentin never just backed down, especially when money was involved. Rowena shrugged her shoulders. People change, especially when they become parents. The baby's still 6 months away, I pointed out. Still, taking responsibility can change people, Rowena insisted. I wanted to believe that, but experience told me otherwise. I knew my grandson too well. That day, the 8th day after the move, I was going to the bank. I wanted to deposit the money I had left from the sale of the house. Some for myself, and some for Quentin and Darcy to help them with the down payment on the apartment. I even found a good realtor to help them find a place in their price range. I was just finishing getting dressed when the doorbell rang sharply. Not the melodic sound programmed into the intercom, but the insistent, almost aggressive pushing of the doorbell button. Only a person already in the entryway could ring like that. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. Quentin was standing there, disheveled, with red eyes and tightly compressed lips. He was clearly furious. "Grandmother!" he shouted, pressing the bell again. "I know you're home! Open up!" I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, and opened the door. "Quentin," I said as calmly as I could. "What a surprise." "Surprise?" He grinned wickedly. "You're the one with surprises, not me." He strode unceremoniously into the apartment without even asking permission. I closed the door and followed him into the living room. Quentin paced restlessly around the room, looking around. "You've settled in well," he said bitterly. "A new house, a new life. Have you thought about your family?" I felt a wave of irritation rising inside me, but I tried to stay calm. "Quentin," I said, "let's talk like adults. Sit down, please." He reluctantly lowered himself onto the couch, but he showed that he wasn't going to listen to any explanations. "How did you enter the entrance?" I asked. "Your neighbor was coming out. I slipped in after him." Quentin waved him away. "What's the difference?" "The difference is that it's private property and—" "Private property?" he interrupted. "Like our house that you sold without warning? This is it. Here it comes." "It was my house, Quentin," I said firmly. "I owned it, I paid the taxes, I maintained it all these years. It was a family home," Quentin exclaimed, pushing himself forward. "The house where my mom grew up, where I spent half my childhood. The house my grandfather had bought for the whole family." "Hubert bought the house for him and me," I countered. "We were a young family with a small child, and we needed a place to live. No one was thinking about grandchildren or great-grandchildren back then. And Hubert certainly hadn't planned for me to sit in an empty house at 75, while you decided when it was convenient for you to get one." Quentin's face flushed red with anger. "How can you say that? Darcy and I didn't want you to sit in an empty house. We planned for you to live with us. With a family surrounded by care." I couldn't contain my laughter. "A family? Quentin, you and Darcy in 4 years never once took me out to dinner. You only came to see me when you needed money. That's not family or caring." Quentin looked offended. "That's not true. I've always taken care of you. I've always made sure you were okay." "Yes," I agreed. "Every time before asking for money for another investment." Quentin rose to his feet, his hands clenched into fists. "I didn't want to believe Mom when she said you'd changed, that you'd become callous and selfish. But now I see she's right. It's all Rowena's influence. She was always jealous of our family, always trying to keep you away from us." I stood up too, though my knees ached with protest. "Don't you dare blame Rowena," I said, and my voice sounded harsher than I intended. "She's the only person who supported me all these years. The only one who asked me what I wanted for myself, not what anyone else wanted from me." "And what do you want?" Quentin asked defiantly. "Abandon your family? Leave us without help when we need it most?" "I'm not abandoning you," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "I just decided it was time to live for myself. I don't have much time left, Quentin. I'm 75 years old." "You're 75 years old and you sold your house to what? To move into this little apartment?" He put his hand around the room. "Spend all the money on new furniture and knickknacks?" I shook my head. "No, Quentin, I sold the house to go traveling, the trip around the world that I dreamed of all my life." He froze, staring at me with his mouth open. There was silence in the room for a moment, and then Quentin laughed, a bitter, almost hysterical laugh. "Traveling?" he squeezed out at last. "You're kidding, right?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm not kidding. I'm going on a cruise in 2 weeks with Rowena." Quentin stopped laughing as abruptly as he'd started. His face contorted with anger. "You spent the money from the sale of your house on some stupid cruise?" Money that could have helped your family, your future great-grandson? I spent a third of the money, I clarified. I'll put the rest in escrow. And some for you and Darcy, for a down payment on an apartment. An apartment? Quentin was almost shouting. We didn't want an apartment. We wanted a house. Your house. With a garden for the baby, with a deposit in the form of an old woman who will die sooner or later and leave you everything, I finished for him. I am not so blind, Quentin. I could see Darcy measuring the rooms with her gaze, imagining where she would put her furniture. The way she talked about the major renovations you would do someday. I know what you were counting on. Quentin turned white, then red. How dare you? He hissed. How dare you accuse us of waiting for me to die? I shrugged. I'm not accusing. It's natural. I'm old, you're young. It's the normal course of things. But as long as I'm alive, I want to manage my life and my possessions on my own. Quentin clenched his fist so hard that his knuckles turned white. For a moment I was afraid he was bigger than me, stronger, and clearly furious. But then I saw the tears in his eyes, and fear changed to pity. Grandmother, he said, his voice sounding almost pleading. You don't understand. We have nowhere to live. The landlord is selling the house and we have to move out in 3 weeks. We don't have the money for a down payment on a new apartment, and Darcy's pregnant. I know, I said softly. Sybil told me. Congratulations, by the way. I'll be delighted to be a great-grandmother. What kind of great-grandmother will you be if Darcy and I live on the street? Quentin asked bitterly. You won't live on the street, I said firmly. I told you I'm willing to help you with the down payment on the apartment. I even found a good realtor to help you find a place in your price range. Here. I handed him the business card I'd taken out of my bag. Call her. Tell her it's from me. Quentin stared at the business card, making no attempt to take it. We don't want an apartment, he repeated stubbornly. We wanted a house. Your house. I sighed. Quentin, we'd already discussed this. The house is sold, the deal's closed. The new owners have already moved in. I couldn't change it even if I wanted to. But you don't want to, Quentin said bitterly. You don't care about us. You care more about some stupid trip than you do about your family's future. It's not some stupid trip, I countered, feeling my anger rising. This is my life's dream, a dream I've been putting off for decades because someone else always wanted it. Your grandfather, your mom, you. Someone always needed me more than I needed my own life. And now you've decided to make up for it? Quentin asked sarcastically. At 75? Isn't that a little late? It is, I cut him off. As long as I can still walk, see, and enjoy life. Quentin shook his head, looking at me with undisguised pity. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Grandma. These cruises are for the young and healthy. You can't take the strain. You need peace, comfort. I need new impressions and a chance to see the world, I interrupted. And it's not up to you to decide what I can do and what I can't. Quentin took a step toward me and suddenly grabbed my arm. His grip was painful. You don't understand, he said, desperation in his voice. Darcy and I are on the edge. We have debts. A lot of debt. We were counting on this house as our salvation. And now, he squeezed my hand even tighter. Now you have to give us that money. Now. I tried to get free, but Quentin held on tight. Let me go, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and commanding. You're hurting me. He didn't let go. On the contrary, his face contorted with rage. You have to help us, he almost shouted. You have to, after all your grandfather and I have done for you. Your grandfather did a lot for me, I agreed. But you, Quentin, have only taken. All your life you've done nothing but take from me without giving anything in return. It was cruel but true, and it seemed to strike a nerve with him. Quentin let go of my hand and took a step back, looking at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. So this is what you think of us? He said quietly. About your family. I think family is more than blood, I said, rubbing my wrist. Family is mutual support, respect, caring. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? Not to ask for money, but just out of interest? Quentin was silent. We both knew the answer. I'm not leaving you and Darcy, I said softer. I'm willing to help you with housing. but I won't sacrifice my dream for you to live in a big house you can't afford. But Darcy and I, Quentin began. I raised my hand, stopping him. I know you were counting on a house. But Quentin, even if I gave you the house, how would you maintain it? It's always breaking down, needing repairs. The roof, the plumbing, the electrics. That's a lot of money. And you don't have any. We could do it, Quentin said stubbornly, but he didn't sound so sure. No, I said softly. No, I said softly. You wouldn't. In a year or two, you'd either be in debt up to your eyeballs or you'd have sold the house for less than I got. And then you'd still be where you are now, looking for a place to live within your means. Quentin sank down on the couch, wrapping his arms around his head. But my wife and we have nowhere to live, Grandma. His voice shook and I saw tears roll down his cheeks. In front of me sat not a grown man of 34, but a confused boy who didn't know what to do. I sat down next to him and placed my hand gently on his shoulder. Quentin, I said softly, you have options. You can rent an apartment for a while you look for a permanent place to live. You can try to find something with the help of the realtor I recommend. I can help with money for a down payment. But you have to solve your own problems. It's part of growing up. He looked up at me with tearful eyes. But Darcy, she dreamed of a house with a garden, a room of her own for the baby, Darcy is a young woman, I said. She has her whole life ahead of her to realize that dream. But for that, you both need to learn to live within your means, to plan, to save. Not rely on a miracle or your grandmother's inheritance. Quentin wiped his tears with his sleeve, like he used to do when he was a kid. What if we moved in with you? He suddenly suggested. Just temporarily, until we find our own place? You've got 2 bedrooms here, plenty of room. I shook my head. No, Quentin, it's not an option. First of all, I'm leaving in 2 weeks for a 2-month trip. Secondly, I sighed. Darcy and I are not the best neighbors. Aren't exactly the best roommates. We're too different. That was an understatement. In fact, Darcy and I could barely stand each other. She thought me old-fashioned and boring. I found her superficial and ill-mannered. Living together would have been a disaster for everyone. But what are we going to do? Quentin's voice sounded desperate. I stood up and walked over to the table where my bag was. I took out an envelope and handed it to Quentin. Here, it's a check for $20,000. It's enough for a down payment on a decent apartment or 6 months' rent. It's up to you what you want to do with that money. But please spend it wisely. Quentin looked at the envelope as if he couldn't believe his eyes. You were going to give me this money all this time? Yes, I nodded. I was going to the bank today to open an account in your name. But since you're here, I can give you the check right now. He took the envelope, but he looked confused. But why? Why didn't you say so in the first place? Why did you make me? Because you didn't give me a chance, I said softly. You barged in here with accusations without even listening to me. How could I explain anything? Quentin looked at the envelope in his hands, and different emotions were struggling on his face. Relief, shame, confusion. And another thing, Quentin, I added. This is the last money I'm giving you for nothing. In the future, if you need financial help, we'll do it as a loan, with paperwork and repayment terms. You're a grown man. You're going to be a father soon. It's time to learn responsibility. He nodded, still looking at the envelope. Thank you, he said quietly at last. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Tell me you'll use that money wisely, I said. And that you'll never grab my hand again, threatening and demanding. Quentin looked up, shame in his eyes. I'm sorry, he mumbled. I don't know what came over me. We're so desperate and I understand, I said. But that's no excuse. Don't you ever, ever, ever treat me like that again, or anyone else. He nodded, lowering his head. I promise. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I didn't rush Quentin, giving him time to collect his thoughts. Finally, he stood up. I have to go, he said. Darcy is waiting. She'll be happy to know we have money for a place to live. I hope so, I said, rising as well. And Quentin, I really want to help you find a good place to live. But I also want you to understand, my life belongs to me. My decisions are mine. I love you. But I won't sacrifice myself for your comfort. Not this time. Quentin looked at me for a long time, and there was something new in his gaze. Maybe understanding, maybe just tiredness. I will try to understand, he said at last. But it's hard, grandmother. It's hard to accept that you've suddenly become different. I'm not different, I objected. I've always been like this. It's just that I used to suppress my desires for the sake of others. And now I decided it was time to think about myself. He nodded, though I could tell by the look on his face that he didn't quite understand. We walked to the door, and before we left, Quentin turned around. I'll tell Darcy that the money is my savings, he said. It'll be easier that way. I smiled. As you wish, Quentin, it's your right. When the door closed behind him, I felt strangely relieved. The conversation had been hard, but necessary. Maybe now Quentin would begin to realize that I wasn't just a grandmother willing to sacrifice everything for him, but a person with her own desires and dreams. I went back into the living room and sat down in the chair by the window. My wrist was still sore from Quentin's grip. I rubbed it, thinking about how close we'd come to a complete breakup. If he didn't calm down, if he kept pushing, I could have kicked him out of the apartment and never let him in again. But despite all his mistakes, Quentin was still my grandson. And somewhere deep inside, he was still that sweet boy who brought me bouquets of wildflowers and told me funny stories from school. I couldn't just cross it all off. But I also couldn't sacrifice myself for him. Not now, when my own dream was so close to being realized. The night after Quentin's visit, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, going over every word he'd said, every gesture, every look in my mind. The moment he'd grabbed my hand came back to me again and again, making me shiver. Never before had Quentin been aggressive toward me. Was something different about him? Or maybe it had always been there, I just didn't want to see it. In the morning, looking at the bruises on my wrist, I felt a strange mixture of feelings: resentment, frustration, anger. But strongest of all was guilt. Maybe I had really acted selfishly, spending money on a trip when my family needed help. I sipped my tea, staring out the window at the waking city, and ran these thoughts over and over again. The cruise tickets lay in front of me. 2 weeks to sail. I could cancel the trip, get at least some of the money back. I could give it to Quentin and Darcy, help them buy a house, maybe not the one I was living in, but one with a garden for the baby. But then I remembered how Quentin looked at me, not as a person with his own desires and rights, but as a resource that should be at his disposal. How Darcy had always spoken to me condescendingly, as if I were an old woman out of her mind. How they both took my help for granted, never asking what I wanted for myself. I shouldn't have felt guilty for finally deciding to live for myself, and yet the guilt wouldn't let go. In the middle of the afternoon, Rowena arrived. She always somehow sensed when I needed support. When she saw the bruises on my wrist, she gasped, "Lorna, what happened?" I told her about Quentin's visit, about his anger and demands, about the way he grabbed my arm. "How dare he?" Rowena was outraged. That's violence! We should report him to the police." "Don't exaggerate," I shook my head. "He was just desperate. Besides, he'd already gotten his money. I think the incident is over." Rowena pressed her lips together. "You're too nice to him, Lorna. You always have been. He doesn't deserve a grandmother like that." "He's my grandson," I replied simply, "no matter what he does." We sat on the balcony, drinking tea and talking. I shared with Rowena my doubts, my guilt, my thoughts about canceling the trip. "Don't even think about it," she exclaimed. "You've spent your whole life sacrificing yourself for others. Enough. You deserve this trip. Besides, you didn't leave them to their fate. You gave them money for a place to live." "But maybe they really need a house, not an apartment?" I was unsure. "With a baby." "Lorna." Rowena looked me straight in the eye. "Millions of families with children live perfectly well in apartments. That's not the problem. The problem is that Quentin and Darcy are used to getting everything they want at other people's expense. It's time for them to grow up and start solving their own problems." I knew she was right. And yet a part of me, the part of me that had spent decades believing it was my duty to care for others, to sacrifice myself, continued to resist. "What if I went next year?" I suggested. "When Quentin and Darcy are settled, when the baby comes." "There will be another reason to postpone the trip next year," Rowena said firmly. "There will always be a reason. That's why you've been putting off this dream for 50 years. And then, Lorna, she lowered her voice, you're not getting any younger. None of us are getting any younger. You're in good shape now. You can enjoy the journey. But what happens in a year, 2 years, 5 years? Are you sure you'll be able to travel as comfortably? I put my head down. Of course, Rowena was right. My health, while not bad for my age, wasn't getting any better. The arthritis in my knees was getting worse, my eyesight was deteriorating, and my blood pressure was spiking more frequently. Who knows what will happen in a year? Lorna, Rowena continued softly, seeing my hesitation. Remember how we used to dream about this trip when we worked at the atelier? How we cut pictures out of magazines, how we planned the route? Half a century, Lorna. Half a century we've been waiting for this moment. Would you give up on your dream now that it might finally come true? I remembered those times, so far away and so vivid in my memory. Rowena and I, young, full of energy and hope, dreamed of traveling, of adventure, of the world beyond our small town. And then I met Hubert, got married, had Sybil, and travel dreams were a thing of the past. Not for Rowena. She'd traveled halfway around the world, seen the places we dreamed of together, and now she could finally show them to me. You're right, I finally said. We're going. I'm not canceling this trip. Rowena glowed. That's my Lorna. She squeezed my hand. We're going to see the world, friend, just like we dreamed. After Rowena left, I felt more confident. She always knew how to strengthen my spirit, to remind me of my own desires and rights. That was her strength, and probably the reason Sybil and Quentin disliked her so much. Rowena never let them manipulate me, always reminding me that I deserved respect and happiness as much as they did. In the evening, Sybil called. I knew immediately from her voice that she was talking to Quentin. How could you, Mother? She asked me without preamble. How could you do that to Quentin? What are you talking about, Sybil? I asked calmly, though my insides were clenched. He came to you to ask for help, and you humiliated him. You made him feel like a beggar begging for a handout. So Quentin put our conversation in that light. I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. It's not like that, Sybil, I said firmly. Quentin had barged in on me uninvited, demanding money he felt I was obliged to give him. He grabbed my arm. Sybil, you should see my wrist now. There was silence on the other end of the line. What? Sybil asked at last, and there was doubt in her voice. Grabbed my arm, I repeated, hard, to the point of bruising, demanded that I give him all the money from the sale of the house. He couldn't, Sybil began, but she stopped talking. He was just upset, Mother. He and Darcy are desperate. They have nowhere to live, and this pregnancy. I understand their situation, I said softly. I've helped them. I've given them a check for $20,000 for a down payment or 6 months' rent. But they need a house, Mother, Sybil exclaimed. Not an apartment, a house with a garden with things they can't afford, I finished for her. Sybil, be realistic. Even if I gave them all the money from the sale of the house, they couldn't buy something like this in a good neighborhood. And even if they did, how would they maintain it? Do you know how much it costs to fix a roof, replacing pipes, heating in the winter? Sybil was silent. She knew how much effort and money our old house required, and she also knew that Quentin couldn't afford the expense. But you could help them, she said at last. Instead of wasting money on some travel. I did, I repeated patiently. $20,000 is a lot of money, Sybil, enough to start a new life in a proper home. But I'm not going to support them for years. They're adults, and it's time they learn to live within their means. The next day, I decided to check my Facebook page. I rarely use social media, but I'd set up an account so I could see pictures of Quentin and Darcy and keep up with their lives. It was usually quiet. A few posts from old acquaintances, photos from Rowena's travels, occasionally something from Sybil or Quentin. But today my page was unusually lively. The first thing I saw was Darcy's post tagged Lorna Blundell. Some people only think of themselves even when their loved ones are in trouble. It's so sad to see how money changes people and makes them callous and selfish. Disappointment and family values. There have already been several comments under the post. Maggie Parker, Quentin's former co-worker at the radio station. Oh no! What happened? Jack Rivers, Quentin's friend from high school. Hang in there, guys. You can always count on our support. Linda Fleming, Darcy's friend. I can't believe your mother-in-law would do that, after all you've done for her. I felt a lump come to my throat. Darcy was clearly trying to smear me in the eyes of the people I knew, and judging by the comments, she was succeeding. I wanted to write back, to explain my position, but I stopped myself. An argument on social media is not something I wanted to get into. Instead, I just closed the page and shut down my computer. All day long, I felt depressed. It seemed like the whole world had turned against me. Quentin, Sybil, Darcy, even people I barely knew. They all thought I was selfish, a bad grandmother, a person spoiled by money. But was that really true? Wasn't I entitled to my own life, my own dreams? Did I have to sacrifice everything for a grandson who had never been interested in my desires? By evening, I felt an overwhelming desire to talk to someone who understood me. I called Rowena. Did you see what Darcy posted on Facebook? I asked as soon as she answered the phone. Oh, Rowena sighed. Yeah, I did. Ignore it, Lorna. It's a cheap manipulation. But it works, I said bitterly. Have you seen the comments? Everyone thinks I'm a terrible person. Everyone? Rowena interjected. There's like 5 comments, all from people who only know her side of the story. It's not everyone, Lorna. I was quiet for a moment, digesting her words. Indeed, there were few commenters, and they were all friends of Quentin and Darcy, but somehow it still hurt. I think the whole town will soon be talking about what a terrible grandmother I am, I said. First of all, not the whole town reads Darcy's Facebook, Rowena said dryly. Second, people don't usually care about other people's family dramas. And third, even if someone did believe her, who cares? In 2 weeks, we won't be here. We'll be sailing the Caribbean, enjoying the sun and the ocean, and let them say what they want. I smiled, despite my anxiety. Rowena always had a way of putting things in their proper place. You're right, I said. It's not that important. Exactly, Rowena said quietly. You know, I think you should limit your contact with them until you leave. No phone calls, no visits. Focus on getting ready for your trip. Buy new clothes, read up on the places we'll be visiting. Do something for yourself. The morning was gloomy. Heavy clouds hung over the city, promising rain. I sat at the window, watching the passers-by going about their business and thinking about the conversation I was going to have with Sybil. It had been 3 days since our last conversation, and all that time I had been trying to find the right words to explain my position to her. But the more I thought, the more difficult the task seemed. Sybil had always been a difficult child, stubborn, independent, with her own opinions on every subject. As a child, these qualities made me proud. My girl knows what she wants. But as she got older, her stubbornness started to cause problems, especially when it came to Quentin. Sybil had given birth to him in her 20s, while still a student. The baby's father, Brandon, soon after Quentin's birth, an irresponsible, selfish young man unprepared for fatherhood. When Quentin turned 5, they divorced, and Brandon disappeared from their lives, moving to California. Hubert and I helped Sybil as best we could, financially with childcare. I often stayed with little Quentin while Sybil went to school or worked. Maybe that's why there was always a special bond between me and my grandson. I was not just a grandmother to him, but almost a second mom. Sybil idolized her son. Perhaps it was compensation for his father's absence, but the fact remained that she couldn't say no to him. His every whim was fulfilled, his every prank forgiven, his every wish made law. Hubert and I tried to gently point out to her the dangers of such parenting, but she wouldn't listen. He's growing up without a father as it is, she said. I don't want him to feel left out. As a result, Quentin grew up with a firm belief that the world should revolve around him, that his desires were more important than the desires of others, that he was owed everything. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my musings. I flinched. Was it really 2 o'clock already? A glance at the clock told me that Sybil had arrived half an hour early. When I opened the door, I saw not only my daughter, but Quentin as well. He was standing behind her, looking away, clearly uncomfortable. For a moment, I thought he was embarrassed by his previous behavior. But then I noticed that Sybil was holding his hand, like a small child being brought before a strict school principal. Mom! Sybil nodded at me and walked into the apartment, pulling Quentin with her. We've come to talk. Her tone was businesslike, almost official. I closed the door and followed them into the living room. Sybil was already sitting on the sofa, Quentin awkwardly seated next to her. I took the chair opposite. I'm glad you came, I began. We really need to talk. Yes, Sybil nodded. We need to clear the air once and for all. She spoke as if she were preparing for a business negotiation. Sybil had always been like that. Focused, businesslike, pragmatic, even in family relationships. Quentin told me about your conversation, she continued. About how you refused to help them with the house, about you spending money on some trip while your family needed your help. I shifted my gaze to Quentin. He was still looking away, avoiding meeting my eyes. Did Quentin tell you how he grabbed my hand? I asked calmly. How he demanded the money he thought I owed him? Sybil was confused for a moment, but quickly pulled herself together. He was upset, Mama. He and Darcy are desperate. They have no place to live. They're about to have a child. And I helped them, I interrupted. $20,000 for a down payment or rent. That's a lot of money, Sybil. But they need a house, she exclaimed. Not an apartment, a house, with a garden for the baby, with things they can't afford, I interrupted again. Sybil, be realistic. Even if I gave them all the money from the sale of the house, they couldn't afford to keep it. Do you know how much it costs to fix the roof? Replacing the pipes? Heating in the winter? Sybil was silent. She knew how much effort and money our old house required, and she also knew that Quentin couldn't afford the expense. But you could help them, she said at last, instead of spending money on some trip? I've been helping all my life, I said quietly. You, Quentin, even Darcy, though she was never particularly grateful to me. I've given you my time, my energy, my money. I have never once regretted it. But now, Sybil, now I want to live for myself. I want to fulfill a dream I've been putting off for 50 years. Is that so selfish? Sybil pressed her lips together. It's not about selfishness, Mother. It's about priorities. What's more important, some travel or your great-grandson's future? Why should I choose? I asked. Why can't it be both? I helped Quentin and Darcy with the money for a place to live. Yes, it's not their dream home, but it's a roof over their heads. Why should I give up my dream so they can live in a larger house? Sybil was at a loss for an answer. She looked at Quentin as if expecting encouragement, but he remained silent. You know, Sybil, I continued more gently, I understand your desire to protect your son. It's natural for a mother. But sometimes the best defense is to let him handle things on his own. Quentin isn't a child anymore. He's 34 years old. At his age, you've already raised him alone, working, studying, and not expecting someone to solve all your problems. It's different, Sybil objected. I had you and Dad. You were always there for me. Yes, you were, I agreed. But you didn't do everything for you. You made your own decisions, took responsibility for your own life. And Quentin? He's always waiting for someone else to solve his problems. First you, now me. Quentin finally looked up. It's not fair, Grandma, he said quietly. I work hard. It's just doesn't always work out. Of course, I nodded. It doesn't always work out. It's okay, Quentin. Life doesn't always work out the way we plan. But it's important not to give up and look for new solutions, not to wait for someone to come and fix everything. That's what we're looking for, Quentin said stubbornly. But right now we need help with the baby. And I helped, I reminded him. $20,000, Quentin. That's no small thing. Sybil stood up suddenly. Let's talk straight, Mother, she said sharply. This isn't about money, is it? It's Rowan. She's the one who turned you against us. She's always been jealous of our family, always wanted to keep you away from us. I couldn't believe my ears. Sybil had always disliked Rowena, but she had never been so openly hostile to her. That's not true, I said firmly. Rowena has been my best friend for 50 years. She has never tried to distance me from you. On the contrary, she's always supported me when I've done more for you than I could afford. Oh yes, Sybil grinned bitterly. Supported you by telling you about your travels, about your free life, making you feel like you were missing out on something important. I sighed. So here's the thing. Sybil had always thought that Rowena was somehow making me feel deprived, unhappy. that she was leading me astray from the right path, the path of self-sacrifice for my family. Rowena never made me feel left out, I said calmly. She was just living her life, doing what she loved. And yes, sometimes I was jealous of her, but that wasn't her fault. It was my choice to have a family. And I didn't regret it. Until recently. Until recently? Sybil frowned. What does that mean? I looked at her, then at Quentin. They both looked confused, not sure what was going on. It was as if they couldn't believe that I, always so docile and willing to do anything for them, had suddenly decided to put my own desires above theirs. It means, I said slowly, that lately I've been wondering if I've been living the right life. All these years I've given myself to my family, first to Hubert, then to you, then to Quentin, always putting your needs before my own. And what have I gotten in return? A daughter who comes twice a year, a grandson who only thinks of me when he needs money, and a daughter-in-law who thinks I'm a burden. Mother, exclaimed Sybil, it's not true. We love you. It's just that we have our own lives, our own worries. Of course, I nodded. You have your own life, and I must have my own. Not only taking care of you, but also my own desires, dreams, plans. But you always said that family was the most important thing, Sybil said, perplexed. That there was nothing more precious than children and grandchildren. And that's true, I said softly. You are the most precious thing to me. But that doesn't mean I have to give up myself for you. It doesn't mean that my wishes don't matter. Sybil shook her head. You've changed so much, Mother. I don't recognize you. I haven't changed, I objected. It's just that for the first time in years, I've decided to be honest, with myself and with you. I love you, but I also want to live my life. I want to see the world while I still can. I want to fulfill a dream I've been putting off for too long. Quentin stood up suddenly and walked to the window. The rain that had been threatening to fall all day had finally started, large drops hitting the glass. You know, Grandmother, he said without turning around, when I was a boy, you used to tell me about faraway lands, showed me pictures in magazines, a globe. You said you'd see all these places with your own eyes someday. I looked at him in surprise. I didn't think Quentin remembered those conversations. They had been so long ago, when he was about 6 or 7 at most. Yes, I said quietly. I did. I didn't understand then, Quentin continued, still looking out the window. I thought, why doesn't Grandma go right away? I mean, grown-ups can do whatever they want. He turned to me, and I saw something new in his eyes. Understanding? Remorse? I'm an adult now, he said. And I know you're not. Adults can't do everything they want. They have duties, responsibilities. But you're 75, Grandma. You've fulfilled all your responsibilities. I guess it's really your time now. I couldn't believe my ears. Quentin, who had always thought only of himself, suddenly showed understanding of my feelings. Sybil seemed shocked too. She looked at her son in bewilderment. Quentin, she exclaimed. What are you saying? What about your house? The child? Mother, Quentin looked at her tiredly. Grandmother is right. We can't afford the house. Even if she gave us all the money, we wouldn't be able to keep it. 20,000 is very generous. We can find a nice apartment. Sybil looked from her son to me and back again, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. Are you giving up? She finally asked. Just like that? What about your plans? Your dreams? We'll find another way, Quentin said. Maybe in a couple of years, when business is better. But right now we have to be realistic. Sybil suddenly laughed, a bitter, almost hysterical laugh. I can't believe it, she exclaimed. My son, who never backs down, has suddenly decided to be realistic. And my mother, who always thought about family, suddenly decided to live for herself. The world had turned upside down. I watched my daughter carefully. Behind her resentment, behind her anger, I saw something else. Fear. Fear of change. Fear of losing control. Sybil, I said softly, it's not the end of the world. Quentin and Darcy will find suitable accommodation. I'll go on a trip, but I'll be back. Everything will be fine. All right? Sybil shook her head. Nothing will be fine. You'll go away, and who knows if you'll come back. At your age, a trip like that. What if something happens? If you get sick somewhere in a foreign country? If that's it. It wasn't just Quentin she was worried about. She was worried about me too. Sybil. I stood up and walked over to her and took her hands. I understand your concerns, but I'm not going to risk my health. This is a luxury cruise with medical care on board. I'll have Rowena with me, who's traveled halfway around the world and knows how to handle emergencies. And I have good insurance that will cover any medical expenses. But you've never traveled, exclaimed Sybil. You've never been farther than San Francisco. How will you cope with new places, languages, cultures? With Rowena's help, I replied calmly. And then, Sybil, traveling is not only a hardship, but also a joy of discovery. I've wanted to see the world all my life. Can't you be happy for me? Sybil turned away, trying to hide her tears. I'm just afraid, Mother, she said quietly. I'm afraid I won't see you again. There it was, the real cause of her indignation. Not the money, not the house for Quentin. Fear of losing me. I put my arms around my daughter, feeling her tremble. I'll come back, Sybil, I whispered. I promise. And I'll bring you so many stories you'll be tired of hearing. Suddenly, she clung to me as she had done when she was a child, when she was scared or sad. I'm sorry, Mommy, she said. I shouldn't have. All those accusations, I just didn't know how to express my fear. I understand, I said softly, stroking her back. And I'm not angry. But Sybil, you have to let me go. Give me the right to my own life, to make my own decisions, even if they seem unreasonable to you. She nodded, wiping away her tears. I'll try, she promised. Quentin, who had been watching us, suddenly came over and hugged us both awkwardly. I'm sorry, Grandma, he said, for everything. For the way I acted, for the way I grabbed you. I was desperate, but that's no excuse. I looked at my grandson, so big and strong and yet so vulnerable. Despite all his flaws, I loved him. I forgive you, Quentin, I said. But I hope you've learned your lesson. You can't get everything you want by force or manipulation. Sometimes you just have to accept the situation and look for new solutions. He nodded, and in his eyes I saw understanding. Maybe this crisis had really helped him grow up. Maybe now he would start taking responsibility for his life. We talked for a long time, about everything and nothing, about the past, about the future, about hopes and fears. For the first time in many years, it was a real, honest conversation, without innuendo or hidden resentments. Sybil talked about her anxieties, how she was afraid of growing old, how lonely she sometimes felt. Quentin shared his plans for the future, more realistic than usual. And I told them about my dream, to see the world while I still could. By evening, as they got ready to leave, the atmosphere had completely changed. The tension with which they had come had disappeared, giving way to understanding and acceptance. Bring me the pictures, Sybil said, hugging me goodbye. From every country. I want to see you enjoying your trip. I will, I promised. Quentin hugged me too, gently, as if afraid of hurting me. Be careful out there, okay? He said. And call sometimes, just so we know you're okay. Of course, I smiled. And you call too. Tell us how you're doing with the apartment search. We've already started looking, Quentin said. There are some good options. I think we'll be settled in by the time you get back. After they left, I sat at the window for a long time, looking out at the rain. I felt light and calm. For the first time in years, I felt that there was no reticence, no hidden resentment or misunderstanding between me and my family. We talked frankly, listened to each other, found a compromise. Of course, all problems were not solved in one day. Quentin and Darcy were still in a difficult financial situation. Sybil still had fears about my journey. I myself still had doubts and worries. But at least we stopped pretending everything was perfect. We stopped holding our emotions in, letting them turn into muffled irritation and resentment. I picked up my phone and dialed Rowena's number. Can you believe it? I said when she answered. Sybil and Quentin and I talked. We had a real talk, and they understood, accepted my decision. They did? Rowena sounded surprised. Well, that's unexpected. But I'm happy for you, Lorna. I really am. Me too, I said. I feel like something big happened today. It's like we finally took off our masks and saw each other for what we really are. That's good, Rowena said. Now you can enjoy the journey without guilt. Yes, I smiled. Now I'm really ready for adventure. Hanging up the phone, I walked to the table where the cruise tickets were lying. In 10 days, Rowena and I would be going on our dream trip. We'll see places we've dreamed of for so long, meet new people, taste new foods, hear new languages. And for the first time in years, I will do it with a light heart, knowing that my family understands and accepts my decision. That they don't think I'm selfish for finally deciding to live for myself. That they see me not only as a grandmother willing to do anything for her grandchildren, but as a person with her own desires and dreams. It was a good feeling, a feeling of freedom, of understanding, of acceptance, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a very long time. The last days before I left flew by in a flurry of activity. I checked and double-checked my list of things, gathered documents, called Rowena for details. A strange feeling, a mixture of excitement, impatience, and anxiety came over me. After 75 years of living in one city, I was finally going on the trip of my dreams. After our conversation with Sybil and Quentin, the family's relationship had changed. They called more often, inquiring about my plans, even offering to help me prepare for the trip. Quentin stopped by once to help me with my new suitcase, packed it, showed me how the code lock worked, even attached a brightly colored ribbon to make it easier to recognize the luggage on the tape. "Take care of yourself, Grandma," he said goodbye. "Don't overwork yourself." There was genuine concern in his voice, and it touched me. Maybe our conflict had really helped him to see me not only as a grandmother who was always ready to help, but as an ordinary person with her own desires and dreams. Sybil had changed too. Her anxiety was still there, but now she tried to hide it, not wanting to dampen my joy at the journey ahead. "I'll miss you, Mother," she said during our last telephone conversation before we left. "But I'm happy for you. I really am." "Thank you, dear," I replied. "I'll miss you too, but it's only for 2 months. I'll definitely come back." "I know," she said. "And you'll bring lots of pictures and stories. I'll be waiting." I could still hear the tension in her voice, but she was genuinely trying to be supportive, and I appreciated it. Even Darcy, who always kept a detached demeanor, sent a card. "Have a safe trip. Take care of yourself, Darcy." Brief and formal, typical Darcy, but it was a step up nonetheless. Perhaps having a child will indeed change her, make her softer, more human. At least I hoped so. The day before I left, Rowena came over with a bottle of champagne. "We should celebrate," she said as she entered the apartment. "Tomorrow we're going on our dream trip." Her enthusiasm was infectious. We opened the champagne, poured glasses, and clinked glasses. "To the fulfillment of dreams," Rowena said. "To freedom, to adventure, to friendship," I added. "Without you, I never would have made this journey." Rowena waved me off. "Nonsense. You're stronger than you think, Lorna. You always have been. Just let others decide for you, but not this time." We sat on the balcony, sipping champagne and discussing our upcoming trip. Rowena had already been to many of the places we were heading to and was eager to share her impressions. "In Cartagena, you have to try the ceviche," she said. "And in Bali, visit Uluwatu Temple at sunset. The sight is unforgettable." I listened to her, smiling. Rowena always knew how to see the beauty in small things, to enjoy the moment. It was a quality I'd always envied, and I confess I'd learned a little from her. "You know," I said when she paused, "it's weird for me to realize that I'm leaving Springdale tomorrow, for the first time in so many years." "How does it feel?" Rowena asked. I wondered. Exciting, scary, and at the same time, right, like I'm finally doing something I should have done a long time ago. Rowena nodded. "That's exactly how I felt when I first traveled alone, like I was finally being myself." We talked late into the night, reminiscing about the past, sharing plans for the future. As Rowena started to head home, I suddenly felt a strange unease. "Why don't you stay the night?" I suggested it. "We have to go to the airport together tomorrow anyway." Rowena looked at me carefully. "You're nervous," she said. "It's normal, Lorna. Change is always scary." "I know," I smiled. "I just don't want to be alone on the last night before a big move like this." "Then I'll stay," Rowena said firmly. "Do you have any spare pajamas?" We settled into the living room, I on the couch, Rowena in the recliner. Just like when we were young, when we sometimes stayed overnight at each other's houses after a party or a long conversation. We were young and hopeful then, making plans, dreaming of the future. And now, half a century later, we are finally realizing one of those long held dreams. In the morning, we were awakened by an alarm clock at 5 o'clock. The plane to Miami, where our cruise was departing from, left at 8:30, and we needed to be at the airport 2 hours before departure. We packed quickly, hailed a cab. As we left the apartment, I looked around, checking to see if I'd forgotten anything. It was a strange feeling, leaving a place that had become home, even if only for a short time. Is everything okay? Rowena asked, noticing my confusion. Yeah, I nodded. It's strange to leave. You'll get used to it, Rowena said confidently. You'll feel like a fish out of water by the end of the trip. The cab took us to the airport right on time. We dropped off our luggage, went through security, found our gate. We were about an hour away from boarding. Would you like some coffee? Rowena suggested it. I saw a coffee shop on the way here. That would be nice, I agreed. We headed toward the cafe, and then I heard a familiar voice. Mom? When I looked back, I saw Sybil coming toward us through the waiting room. Quentin was trailing behind her. Sybil? I exclaimed in surprise. What are you doing here? We couldn't let you go without saying goodbye, she said, hugging me. I know we talked on the phone, but it's not the same. I'm sorry for the no warning, Quentin added, hugging me too. Mom insisted on the surprise. I was touched. Despite all our differences, they still came to see me off. It meant a lot to me. Rowena tactfully stepped aside, giving us a chance to talk privately. How are things going with the apartment search? I asked Quentin. Great, he smiled. We found a good one near the center. A one-bedroom apartment, sunny, with a balcony. Even with a small plot of land downstairs where we can plant flowers or vegetables. That sounds wonderful, I said sincerely. I'm happy for you. It's thanks to you, Quentin said seriously. Your help, it means a lot to us. And how is Darcy? I asked. Does she like the new apartment? Very much, Quentin nodded. Especially the future nursery. She's already planning the renovations and furniture. I smiled. Typical Darcy, always planning for the future. What about you, Mother? Sybil looked at me with concern. Are you ready to travel? Yes, I said confidently. A little nervous, of course, but mostly excited about the adventure. I'm so happy for you, Sybil said quietly, and I could hear a genuine warmth in her voice. I really am. You deserve this journey. You deserve to see the world you've dreamed of for so long. I looked at my daughter in surprise. Not so long ago, she had been adamantly opposed to my trip, considered it bliss, selfishness. What had changed? I spoke to Dr. Bennett, said Sybil, as if reading my thoughts. He said that at your age, traveling is very good for you. It stimulates the brain, improves your mood, even slows down the aging process. I smiled. So that was it. Sybil needed scientific confirmation to make my decision. It was so like her to always look for a rational explanation. Thank you, darling. I squeezed her hand. Your support means a lot to me. Just be careful, okay? Sybil looked at me anxiously. Don't overwork yourself, keep healthy, and call, at least once a week, so I know you're all right. I promise, I said. I'll call you from every port and send pictures. Our flight was boarding. It was time to say goodbye. It's time, I hugged Sybil. Take care of yourself. And Quentin, too. I will, she hugged me back. Take care of yourself, Mother. Enjoy every moment. Quentin hugged me too, gently and tenderly. Have a safe trip, Grandma, he said. Bring me back a souvenir, okay? Sure, I smiled. What would you like? A surprise, he winked. Something to remind me of you and your journey. Rowena walked over to us, seeing that boarding had been announced. We have to go, she said. Don't worry, I'll take care of Lorna. We'll have her back to you safe and sound in 2 months. Thank you, Rowena, Sybil said seriously. I'm counting on you. It was the warmest thing I'd ever heard Sybil say to Rowena. Maybe their relationship would finally begin to change too. We said goodbye again and headed for the gate. I looked back. Sybil and Quentin were standing next to us, waving. They looked a little sad, but there was no judgment or resentment in their eyes. Just a wish for a happy journey. On the airplane, as I buckled my seatbelt, I felt the tension of the last few weeks finally let go of me. All the decisions had been made, all the conversations had been had, all the goodbyes had been said. Now the real adventure began. Are you excited? Rowena asked, noticing my pensive expression. A little, I admitted. But mostly I felt relieved. It's like I've shed a heavy weight I've been carrying around for years. It's a sense of freedom, Rowena said softly. It only gets stronger, believe me. With each new place, each new experience, you'll feel the boundaries of your world expand. I believed her. Rowena never fooled me. The airplane started down the runway. I looked out the window, the airport, the city, the familiar shape of Springdale getting smaller as we gained altitude. It was a strange feeling, looking down at the place I'd lived in all my life from so high up. Everything looked so small, so insignificant. But it wasn't. Springdale, my home, my family, all of it was still an important part of me. It's just that now I realized there were other parts that deserved attention and development. My love of traveling, my desire to see the world, my friendship with Rowena, all of that was me too. And now I was finally letting those parts manifest. As we gained altitude and the plane leveled out, Rowena took my hand. Do you know what I'm thinking about? She asked. About sitting in Madame Fournier's atelier and dreaming of this moment. Do you remember? We were in our early 20s, cutting pictures out of magazines and imagining that one day we would see all these places. Of course I remember, I smiled. You said you were going to Paris first, and you did as soon as you had enough money. And you dreamed of Venice. Rowena squeezed my hand. And now you're going to see it. Finally. I nodded, feeling my eyes fill with tears. Not from sadness, but from the realization of the moment, of its significance. Half a century I'd waited for this day. Half a century of putting my dream on hold, putting the needs of others before my own. And now, finally, I was doing what I wanted to do. I'm so grateful to you, I said to Rowena, for always supporting me, for never judging my decisions even when you didn't agree with them, for being there for me on this journey. You're welcome, she replied simply. You would have done the same for me. In fact, you already have. All those years of listening to my travel stories, of being excited for me even though you couldn't go. Now it's my turn. We fell silent, each immersed in her own thoughts. I thought about my life, about the decisions that had brought me to this moment, about Hubert, about Sybil, about Quentin, about joys and disappointments, victories and defeats, love and loss. I didn't regret the years I'd lived. I didn't consider them wasted. I loved my family despite all the difficulties. But now I realized that love for my family should not mean giving up on myself, on my desires and dreams. That it is possible to love others without losing yourself. That caring for loved ones does not exclude caring for yourself. It was a valuable lesson that came to me too late. But better late than never, right? The flight attendant announced that electronic devices were available. Rowena pulled out a tablet. Would you like to see pictures of the cruise ship? She offered. I downloaded them last night. Sure, I said with interest. Rowena showed me pictures of the huge white-hulled ship we were to spend the next 2 months on. Luxurious cabins with balconies, restaurants, swimming pools, even a theater. It looked impressive. Can you imagine? This will be our home for the next 2 months, Rowena said excitedly. We'll see so many countries, experience different cultures, taste exotic dishes. Her enthusiasm was contagious. I suddenly caught myself smiling as I anticipated the adventure ahead. The excitement and anxiety that had haunted me for the past weeks gave way to joyful anticipation. Hot, humid weather greeted us in Miami. We took a cab to the harbor where our cruise ship was already towering, huge like a floating city. Looking at it, I couldn't believe this was all happening in real life, that I was really going on a trip around the world. Check-in, boarding, getting acquainted with the cabin, it all went by like a blur. Our cabin was bright and spacious with a balcony overlooking the sea. We quickly unpacked and went up to the upper deck to see the departure. Hundreds of passengers were crowded around the railings, waving to those on shore. Music was playing. People were laughing and talking, excited about the journey ahead. I stood next to Rowena, looking at the distant shore, and felt a strange mixture of emotions, excitement, joy, a twinge of fear, and great relief. My whole life up to this point had been about others: my husband, my daughter, my grandson. I had given them my time, my energy, my love, and I had no regrets. But now, standing on the deck of the ship sailing into the open sea, I realized that it was time to live for myself, to see the world with my own eyes, not through the stories of others, to experience new sensations, to meet new people, to expand the boundaries of my existence. It wasn't selfishness. It was recognizing the value of your own life, your own desires and dreams. "What are you thinking about?" Rowena asked, noticing my pensive expression. "Freedom," I answered. About how strange it felt at 75. "Better late than never," Rowena said wisely. "And besides, you've got a lot of years ahead of you. Years that you can live the way you want to live, not the way anyone else expects you to live." I nodded. She was right. My life wasn't over, it was just beginning a new chapter that I was writing on my own, by my own rules. The shore was almost out of sight. There was only the endless horizon ahead where the sea merged with the sky. Symbolic, isn't it? Like my future. Wide, vast, full of possibilities. "To adventure," Rowena said, raising the champagne glass the waiter had brought us. "To a new life," I added, clinking glasses with hers. We stood on the deck, watching the sunset over the ocean, and I could feel the weight of the past receding, giving way to the lightness of the present. Not all problems had been solved, not all conflicts exhausted. Perhaps when I returned, I would face new challenges, new disagreements with my family. But now, in this moment, I was free. Free from expectations, from obligations, from guilt. Free to be myself, to live my life, to follow my desires. And that feeling was worth all the hardships I had gone through.